everyone, and welcome to the Nordic Sound Channel. As always, I am your host, Jameson Foster, and today we have Kjell Braaten of what I call the Braaten Dynasty here with us, who have been longtime participants in this Nordic Viking music genre, even deemed by the Nordic Mythology podcast as the OG of Viking music. So, Kjell, would you like to say hi to everyone?
Hi there. It's good to be here with all of you and look forward to this conversation.
Cool. Yeah, me too. I love your backdrop, man. I'm loving all those instruments back there.
It's my little tiny office.
Yeah.
It's a tiny bit of my collection though.
A tiny bit. Yeah. I was talking to Jonas last week, and he was just telling me that he hundreds of instruments. We were relating you to a sort of drug dealer where like you have a trench coat and then you just have a whole bunch of instruments under the coat. So that's sort of the reputation you've built for yourself, and it's great. So how have your tours been? We were just talking, you've just been nonstop touring for like the last month or two, right?
Yeah, I left home 2nd of May.
Oh, it's been even longer.
Yeah, and I still got 2 more weeks, so it's actually going to be beyond 6 months of constant touring.
So are you because I know you also teach, are you touring mostly to like play your latest album Blota, or are you doing like an assortment, or are you teaching? Is it a mix? Like, what are you doing for 6 months?
Yeah, I'm going to try to make it simple. So, well, I do a lot of different things. I go to like Viking markets. I go to play at festivals. I do like museums and stuff, and I do a lot of lectures about Viking Age music, both for adults but also for children.
Okay.
Yeah, and I also do some a lot of the skaldic shows, just me and my lyres singing songs about ancient traditions and such.
Awesome.
Yeah, and then I did the Blota show with band only once during the whole summer. It was a show for order for Midgardsblot.
Okay.
And yeah, and then I've been doing like well, Midgardsblot is crazy. I did 6 concerts there. So
yeah, you and Benny, you guys were very busy.
yeah, and Gustav and Runa Hill.
Oh yeah, exactly.
All over the place. So yeah, so I came there. It's like Midgardsblot is like coming home for us guys, you know.
Yeah.
And I put up a band with people from like Eldrim, Folket Borta for Nordavind, from obviously myself and Nebala, and you know, so I kind of gathered the whole thing together, and we made a hell of a show. It was really nice.
Yeah, I heard it was great. I tried to get in, but by the time I got to the Gildehallen, it was just packed from wall to wall. I was like, I'm not getting in there.
I was rather surprised actually by that.
It was great. Yeah, a lot of people were very impressed. I had to rely on videos, but it looked like a really good time. It was just, again, I looked into that room and I was like, there's no way I'm fitting in there.
There's a lot of people who didn't get in, actually.
Yeah, very exclusive show. Very exclusive show.
Yeah, but so, you never know. It's the first time I ever did this, you know, and so I mean, who would guess that thing would happen? You know?
Right. Yeah, that must have been great for you, though.
Everybody, yeah, and everybody knows me from all the different projects I've been in, so it's probably why.
Yeah. So before we talk about the Midgardsblot and the Viking markets and stuff, I did want to ask you about Bob. You've been posting about Bob, your van, and I love it because, you know, I don't have a van, but my wife and I have a Subaru Outback that we can pretend is a van because we can sleep in it while keeping our feet in the car at night. And so when I see you post about the van, I'm like, oh damn, I want one of those. And I just love the name Bob. So do you want to tell us a little bit more about your man Bob?
Yeah, Bob has become a very, very dear friend of mine. Okay. You know, I've been traveling around at like Viking markets and this kind of stuff for more than 20 years now. And my body is not getting younger, and I'm struggling. I'm struggling with arthritis. So
oh man, okay.
Yeah, and traveling the Norwegian coast, it's mostly quite cold and wet, and it hurts.
Yeah.
And last few years it's been so bad that sometimes I can't perform because my body won't allow me to.
Oh man.
So yeah, so I decided I have to do something about that because I
Mhm.
want to continue doing it. So, and then all of a sudden, while I was touring last autumn, all of a sudden Bob appeared to me on my computer screen for a fairly low price.
Okay.
And he's absolutely amazing. I mean, it's a van. It's not like those caravans. It's just
Mhm.
a rebuilt van. Like there's a lot of people doing this in the US. You know,
Mhm.
the van life thingy.
Oh yeah.
It's not so common over here. Mostly they have these big, like chunky caravans with all these like good beginner pieces, and they break quite easily.
Yeah.
It's a strong van, and I can go pretty much anywhere I want, and I have it. It's warm, it's comfy. I have my fridge, and I have my stove, and I have everything I need. You know, it's a tiny little flat.
That's the life, man. It's just your Bob the Flat. I love that. Before you said that he popped up on your computer screen, and all you said was he appeared to me, I imagined you one morning walking out your front door to just this van sitting in your driveway with like the sun shining down on it, and it just has a little name tag on it that says Bob, and just from then on, you guys are just best friends.
Yeah, almost. It actually it came from because these vans are pretty damn expensive in Norway.
Yep.
So but this one it's rather old, but it doesn't matter because it's I mean it's been so well used. It's you can't really see that it's been used, you know.
Yeah,
And
cool.
so so I called this guy in the other opposite end of the country and said like, you know, I would like the car, and he was like, yeah, but there's a lot of people calling, you know. So but why do you want it? He said. And I said like, you know, I'm this touring musician. I teach about ancient music traditions, and my body can't take it, so I need to find something like this. And he said like,
Mhm.
okay, it's yours.
Awesome. You just flash your badge, and he's like, "Oh yes, of course, you can have the
Yeah.
van."
Yeah, I want you to have it, you know. So it was meant to be. And then I normally when I get a new car, you know, yeah, there's a lot of people recently going into this animism thing and stuff, you know. And
Mhm.
recently I just discovered that yeah, probably that's why I have names and talk to all my instruments and stuff. But normally I would sit in the car and I would just take the first like ride, which normally would be a long ride up to the northern parts of Norway for a gig or something, and
Mhm.
then some name appears to me, you know. And
Yeah.
normally it would be something really epic, like the word for those mountains far back there, you know, or you know,
Mhm.
this kind of epic things. But then anything that came to me was just Bob for like 5 hours.
We,
Bob.
my wife and I used to have an old gray pickup truck, and
Mhm.
it was so janky. And I got it used for a really good price. But like all the windows were tinted, and the back window, it was a pickup truck that had a cap on it. But the back window was replaced with a solid surface, so you couldn't actually see out the back.
Oh.
And I'm pretty sure it was used for like driving drugs around Philadelphia, which is why I got it for a really good price. And same with us. Over the years, we were like, we got to have a name for it. And you know, it's this big dumb gray thing. And we rewatched the movie Shrek when it came onto Hulu, and I was like, Donkey. It's Donkey. And it's this big dumb gray pickup truck. It's so clumsy. It was rear wheel drive, so it could not handle any kind of ice. And just anytime we got it, I was like, "Hey, Donkey." Sometimes we say it in the Mike Myers accent. It was sad when we got rid of it, but it just died on us. So we
Yeah,
forever remember Donkey.
yeah. Yeah, but those are the ones you remember, you know. It's like my old highest, which I drove like 500,000 kilometers together, you know.
They stay with you. You form a relationship with them. Yeah, it was a very sad day when we had to get rid of it, but
Yeah.
uh anyway. So you played at Midgardsblot, which is sort of this space where it's like a music festival attached onto a Viking market. And what I noticed is, you know, Americans, we're not really familiar with with this concept of a Viking market. And I was listening to the podcast you do with Matthias,
Yep.
and it seems like that's where you really came into this style of music. At least that's what I got from the episode. So if you could just tell us, like, especially for the Americans in the audience, a little bit more about these Viking markets, like what they are, where they, like, how they came about. I would love to learn more about those, because that seems like it's a pretty big part of this music culture.
Yeah, yeah. I thought about this, and I think I just start with how I discovered it, because they were around long before I started doing this. I was at my first Viking markets in 1999 or something. So, but it's been going on since like the early 90s in Norway, and then some places even earlier. But like the Viking markets, like the Borre market, which is one of the oldest ones. I think they started up in 94 or something.
Okay.
And so for me, when I came to the Viking markets as a strange young guy making weird music with throat singing and didgeridoo and djembe drums and stuff,
Yeah.
nobody really cared about us, it was like coming home, because I met all these people, and you had this place where you could gather around the campfire, and nobody really cared about, if you were a banker or if you were a musician or whatever. Nobody cared. What was important was, who are you when you're here?
That's beautiful.
And we were all like outcasts and strange people, but it didn't matter. So it's this, in some way it felt like coming home,
Yeah. So how did they come about? Like what? Because it just seems like such a. The only thing I can liken it to here in the United States is like a Renaissance fair, but it seems like it's a lot smaller scale.
There's a significant difference between what we would call a medieval market and a Viking market.
Okay.
So I don't really go to the medieval ones, which is the medieval markets are all about entertainment. They do teach about medieval times, but it's filled with plastic and all this like crazy stuff. While the Viking markets are more about, it's about two things. So on a medieval market, all the participants, they come there and they do the job and then they go home. Well, on the Viking market, you come there like a gathering every market, and there's different people coming to the different markets, and you travel year by year, and you really get to know these people, because you gather around the fireplace in the evening instead of going home to your hotel or whatever, And it's also about trying to be as authentic as you can where you are at. So if you've been doing this for a long time, it's kind of expected that you have hand-sewn costumes. You can tell that this one is a finding from that find from that time,
Okay.
And you even make your food with authentic stuff. You don't bring a grill. You have a campfire, and you have like hand-smithed equipment that so
it's so cool.
Yeah, it's like going all the way, and I kind of like that. Some of them takes it too far, because we always need new people to keep a thing like that going, and you can't you can't come there and have all this equipment the first year. It's just not possible. It's hilariously expensive to get all this stuff.
Yeah, being authentic is pretty expensive. I really appreciate that you bring that up, because I know it's like, that's not just a problem with apparently Viking markets, but with a lot of these sort of gatherings that are based around this authentic, like, when I say that it's sort of like role playing, I don't mean that in a derogatory sense. I mean that it is a sort of role playing, and I've noticed that people get so defensive and so gatekeepy about what matters, that they accidentally allow their own activity to die out because they forget to let other new people in. So I appreciate that you brought that up.
Yeah, for me it's really important, because some Viking markets are going in that direction. They're taking it too far.
Yep.
And I always ended in a discussion with them, because I'm one of the ancient ones nowadays. And it's expected from me to be like expecting everyone to be authentic and so, but that's not, it's not about that, because we are gonna die out, as you say, you know.
Yeah. I've seen it happen. I've seen it happen here with music styles, right? You know, I was telling Benny I play a lot of bluegrass on this big thing over here.
Oh wow.
Yeah. And so what I've noticed is, you know, in this bluegrass tradition, you have two different types of bluegrass listeners. You have your Sunday morning bluegrass listeners who put on their church best, and they want this straight edge, traditional bluegrass. And if you're from the other side, which is like Colorado bluegrass, which is Grateful Dead, a lot of tie-dye, you're always on some sort of drug. Those two camps don't get along at all,
yeah.
which is why I really love festivals that have both of them there, because they're just looking at each other like this the whole time. But what the old guard doesn't realize is that if it wasn't for these new hippies, these new deadheads, no one would be listening to bluegrass, because you can't just listen to Bill Monroe forever, or something like that. So it's interesting to see that this is a similar conflict that happens in this Viking market area. And it even reminds me of something Benny told me, where when you guys initially started bringing drums and stuff, drums and throat singing, he told me that there might have been a little holdout from that.
There's quite a few people who really hated us for that.
Yeah. So what made you want to bring, like, there must have been a first time you brought a drum. Like, what were you thinking, man?
The thing for me was that, because this happened before actually Benny joined into this scene. It was Gustav from Astral side, and Maria from Heilung.
Okay.
And me and another guy, Gunnar, which isn't doing music anymore. But Gustav was invited to do this show for a New Year's Eve kind of thing with a historical blah blah, you know. And then he called in Maria and me and Gunnar, because we were friends and we were doing like this weird mix up from acoustic ancient kind of music with throat singing and didgeridoos and drums, and you know. And then we met up there dressed up with smoking and stuff, you know, because it was a New Year's Eve thing, you know. And we went on stage and the whole entire crowd was dressed up as Vikings. And they were like with smoking, you know. So it's kind of hilarious thing. But then actually, while we were lying under each one of a keg with or big chunk of meat, we were like, yeah, we want to do more. This was fun. And then we just met up, because those were obviously Vikings. They were like the first heathen society in Norway, which is still the one to go. The Bifrost guys, which is absolutely brilliant people.
Awesome. Yeah, I've heard of them from Matthias, and I think he talks about them sometimes on his podcast too. Yeah, great group.
Yeah, those guys are great guys. Really, they're the proper ones.
Okay. Good.
There's so much shit going on, you know, with this crazy interpretations of what was Viking Age, and you know, mixed up with the like neo-Nazi stuff. And,
you saw what Espen just had to go through, right? Were you caught up with that drama? Yeah.
Yeah. It happens all the time.
Yeah, so I can imagine.
But anyways, so then we got invited to Viking markets, and we just brought what we had, because we had no idea about like Viking music. And I mean, I've been doing this for more than 20 years, and what I end up with is that we still know shit about this. We have no clue whatsoever what they actually were doing with music, you know. The only thing we know for sure is that what people call Viking music today has nothing to do with it.
Yeah, I like that you bring that up, because I actually I actually wanted your input. I wanted to hear your thoughts on something that Benny told me back when I talked to him. I asked him his opinion on like when it's called Viking music, and for the first time I heard someone, he said, and this is the first time I heard anyone put it this way, that it's not about the sound. It's about, I'm simplifying what he said. It's not about the sound. It's about the instruments, the tools being used. And I would love your thought. Like, how do you feel about because of course your music is tied up with the whole Viking pop culture thing, right? And look at
Yeah.
Midgard's Blood, the Viking markets. So what are your thoughts on referring to this? Because you are right, we don't know what it sounded like, but there is something that's connecting it.
Exactly. And what we do know about, we know a tiny bit about it, because there were a couple of guys describing music of the Vikings while the Vikings were still around.
Yep.
Because the Arabs were traveling around and they were writing things down. So there was a couple of Arabs referring to Viking Age music. One of them, who was in Denmark, referring to it as the worst crap they ever heard.
Yep. That was Altartushi, right?
Yeah.
Exactly. He was referring to the horrible barking of dogs.
Yeah, and that's where the throat singing part come in. We started throat singing on Viking Marcus because we didn't have a clue what we was doing, before we started trying to learn what this was all about, because we ended up there by a coincidence, really. But then where was I? And then people started to like defend us for what we were doing, which was like just we didn't know what we were doing. And then all these articles started to come around about, they did throat singing, They probably didn't, But then they referred to him because he says that they were like making these growling noises sounding like wild dogs, and they were like making this gnarly kind of throaty, deep
gurgling
sounding. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, it's just that.
Yeah, that's something that I talk about with my students a lot, or me and Mateus's students. So every day before class, I like to show up early and just play a different Nordic band while everyone gets sat down, because I hate making the students sit down in silence while everyone just gets ready. I feel like it's awkward. And so I picked up the habit of just playing a different Nordic artist for them. Sometimes it's like traditional, sometimes it's classical music, but then sometimes I play this Nordic Viking genre for them. And yesterday I played Nutland for them while I was getting set up, because I talked to Anatoly recently, and so I felt like introducing them. And I had a musician in the class, and they asked, like, how do we know that Viking music sounded like this? And then that was how they easily got out of 10 minutes of class, of me just going on and on about how we don't know, and there's this, and then we will be reading the Altartushi stuff about the throat singing. But my opinion on the throat singing has been, like, if you look at a map of like cultures that throat sing, it's all around the Arctic Circle, and then just mysteriously stops at the political border of Norway and Sweden. I just feel like that. I feel like there's just something lost rather than non-existence, because that makes more sense. Matthias,
I totally do agree with you.
Yeah, and Matthias put it best, where it's like, some people, because I am a musicologist, so I have to spend a lot of time reading historical comments on music that we can't hear. And so the two trains of thought with that comment about sounds like dogs, or the gurgling from the throats, is either they were gurgling like dogs, or that was his way of saying this is garbage. Yeah, and Matthias, I think, put it best when he said that with those two points of view, you can either do nothing with it, to say, oh, it was just his way of saying the music was bad, or you can do something with it, which is way more interesting. And that's what it seems like you guys did. And we're all thankful for you introducing the throat singing, because it's definitely adds something to the music.
Absolutely, and I find throat singing really both. I mean, it does something to you,
Yeah, it turns you into an instrument in a way that singing doesn't. Like, you really feel it everywhere. Where did you pick it up back in the day? Because if you were doing it back in 98, or 99, you were doing it back before you could just YouTube throat singing.
Yeah.
So how did you pick that up?
Actually, for me, I think it was actually my brother Benny who introduced me to it through this. He gave me this album, which I would really, really strongly recommend. It's called Fly My Sadness.
Fly High My Sadness?
Fly My Sadness.
Fly My Sadness, all right.
It's a cooperative project between the Tuvan band, the Hun Hur 2, which is throat singing.
Mhm.
But they normally would do the traditional my horse is
Yeah.
better than your horse kind of thing, you know.
Yeah.
But then they connected with the previous Bulgarian state choir, which is a women's choir,
Mhm.
and they were like taken down because the state was taken over by the military, and the
Yep.
religious stuff was
Mhm.
forbidden. So they couldn't continue. So they actually moved. I think they moved to Russia and continued because they were like studying ancient, like ritualistic music
Mhm.
and stuff. And they're doing this really wavy kind of soundscapey voices, like trying to recreate the sound of the ocean with voices and these kind of things, you know.
That's crazy.
Yeah. And so they connected, and then they brought in three really special jazz musicians from Russia, doing like ancient horns and some accordions with lots of reverb, and and they made this absolutely mind-blowing album, which totally changed me as a musician in an instant. I mean, all all the way I saw music just changed, with that album.
That's an incredible feeling, right?
Yeah.
And I just to foreshadow a little bit of what we will be talking about when we get to talking about your album, I do want to let you know that is the same effect your album had on me. So just so you know that you paid it forward. Okay. So we will talk about that more, but I want you to know that the feeling you had listening to that, you're literally describing how I felt listening to Blota. So
that's a pretty big honor,
it's the truth, right? Like I'm not just trying to fluff you up because you're joining my YouTube channel. It's just it's the facts. So before we talk about your album and all that though, was this New Year's Eve party the party that someone tried to hit Gustav with a flashlight?
No, that was way later. That was on a Viking market.
Because I loved the way you told that story with Matthias and Dan, because like I'm also a pretty tall guy, right? I mean, like around Scandinavians, I'm pretty short, but in America, I'm a pretty big guy. And when you were describing the fact that the guy came up to you and saw how tall you were and then turned to Gustav instead, I have been in those situations. And Benny told us that story too, and it was. I just want to say, like, I laugh at that story every time.
Side, I think Gustav in the middle, so they went past us and to him.
Oh my god, that is so rough. I hate that I'm like. Hopefully, you guys can laugh about it now, right? But I mean, like that.
You know what happened the next day? They came up to Gustav, the same guys, and asked him if he could announce their thing.
Yep. Benny told
like, no, I don't think so.
I don't think so. Benny told me that you guys weren't sure that they knew that you were the same people. Like, so maybe so. So actually even further back. So before you jumped into this Viking music scene, the Viking market music scene, and before you got into this throat singing, what sort of music did you do growing up?
All right, I started up in the classical scene actually.
Cool.
So yep. When I was like 17, I was actually studying to get into the big school of music, like with the big artists, or the big classical artists. So I was
cool.
So I was. You probably laughed, but I was actually playing the tuba. And I
have my big fancy degree here from music school. I was classically trained on this, so no laughter from me. But I love the tuba. Yeah.
So I was actually traveling, doing like concerts in churches and stuff alone with my tuba, without an orchestra or organ or anything, just me and my tuba playing like Beethoven and Bach and stuff.
I love that. That's so great.
But then all of a sudden, I went through this process when I was like 18, I think. And all of a sudden I just discovered, what am I doing with my life really? Do I just want to be this Xerox machine copying 1,000 times before me? This is bullshit. And then I went into like, what are these people actually teaching me? And this has changed a lot throughout the years, though. In the classical music scene, it's much more open-minded now. But back then it was all about what you cannot do. You cannot put these two notes together because it's wrong. But why is it wrong? I mean, I just within a couple of weeks I quit everything. I quit all orchestras and bands and everything, and I just went into the extreme noise scene that was quite popular in the early 90s. And I tried to so I got this 4-track tape recorder and a reverb machine and a old Boss drum machine and stuff. And I just started to see how many of these rules can I possibly break, you know?
And
then I started to so I went into this extreme noise thing, and some of the projects went quite big. I mean, we were playing together with quite big bands back then, doing things I don't remember it anymore. But we were doing shows with My Dying Bride and stuff, you know.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but then, you know, I went so far into it, so I started to wreck and destroy and you know, fess up so much into the sound that what I ended up with was just you know, the further into wrecking down the sound you go, all of a sudden you discover that you're on the opposite side of music. You're all of a sudden you're in the deep down drony ambient world, because it's so wrecked that there's no sound left almost, you know. And then I came into this deep ambient stuff, and then I just started discovering throat singing and didgeridoos and these kind of things. So it was quite a journey.
Yeah, I actually have quite a few friends from my undergrad degree who had the same experience you did. One day they were in all my classes, and then I just never saw them again, because just over the course of a couple weeks they were like, fuck this, I'm out. And that still happens. So that's very relatable, because, you know, I got my music degree at a state school in New Hampshire, and that's where I learned how to play this thing over here. And I had that same feeling you did, where, you know, every week I was learning this new sonata or how to play this. I really loved being in orchestra, but that was once a week, and everything else is practicing by yourself, and then you play a recital for 5 people in an audience. And then I go to and then I met this bluegrass band who needed a bassist, and all of a sudden that's what I was doing. But then my bass teacher didn't want to hear anything about that. He didn't want to hear anything about bluegrass. If I ever talked, yeah, right. And then and I got to this point where I'd be playing orchestra concerts for barely anyone, these recitals for barely anyone, but then over the weekend I'd play bass in this bluegrass band for a packed basement of people having a great time.
Exactly.
I finished out the degree just because I was like, why not? I'm already doing it, right? But that's why I ended up taking a 2-year break from school, because I needed to just detox from a lot of the things I learned about. You're right, you know, don't put these notes together. I still remember the first time I was doing a theory exercise in class, and I recommended that we put a 3-chord under something, and the professor was like, we don't do 3 chords here. I was like, why not? Have you ever heard the Lord of the Rings soundtrack? They're everywhere, they're beautiful. So I definitely relate to what you're saying. Last thing I want to say about the tuba, in New Hampshire we have a yearly tradition called Tuba Christmas. And it's when all of the tuba players in the area get together to play Christmas tunes. And it's just tubas. Sometimes euphoniums are allowed. And I feel like I'm going to send you a video of those, because it's like a big thing. Just because of all instruments, the tuba. But they get really into it. All the tuba players are wearing their Santa hats. And that's great. Yeah. So tell me about your instrument collection, because that seems to be what you're the most infamous for, is having just this big pile of collected instruments over the years. How did collecting start? Did you decide one day to start collecting instruments, or did a few years go by and all of a sudden you're like, wait, I have a lot of instruments?
I don't really know. You know, it's a story about the chicken and the egg, you know. But I've always been really fascinated about instruments from early age. I've always been fascinated by history, And when after I quit that classical scene, I started to discover all this crazy, like the introduce and all these weird instruments. You know, back in the 90s, you know, they were normal. You know, people didn't know about them. So
Right.
and then I discovered that wow, there's so many treasures out there that nobody knows about. You know, and so I started to whenever I went anywhere, I always brought something back that was made by some old guy somewhere, you know, in the backyard somewhere there, you know.
Yeah.
Like proper stuff though. Not always good quality instruments, but like proper. I mean that's folk instruments, you know.
Absolutely.
So and so I already had a collection of crazy instruments when I came into the Viking scene. And then in the Viking scene, the first years it was all about making fuss with drums and, you know, screaming around the fire in the night. And some people loved this for this, others absolutely hated us for it and kicked us in the head with, you know, maglites and stuff. but then I started to discover, you know, if I'm going to continue doing this, I can't be the source of every fight. I mean, I've seen people attending festivals, you know, ending up with fist fights with the arrangers of the festival because of us, you know.
Oh man, you're that powerful.
It was quite crazy from time to time. So I remember I was at Borre, which is the biggest market in Norway, and I went to the arrangers when I arrived there and said, like, you know, we need to do something about this before the market starts. Can you please like write down times, you know, so we're gonna play for until that time of night, and you know.
That's crazy to me that people got that invested into it. Like people are fighting over it.
Yeah, it was totally crazy, you know.
Very strong emotions.
Crazy, you know. You know, we used to go to Iceland a lot with the second band, Viking band we did with Skvaldr when Benny came into the picture, and you know, and we were known to like there wasn't a proper show with Skvaldr without either a guy in the band or an instrument broken, you know. So someone bleeding or the drummer, you know.
Oh man. Man, these get intense. I had no idea.
So yeah, so that was timed. But then I started, you know, when we were traveling, and then we started to like, we came to this crossroad after quite many years, and then you know, some of us wanted to keep up doing what we've always done. I felt like I was a little bit done with that, really. So Benny and Gustav made Folket Borta for Nora Vind, and they continued like doing their things, which they are absolutely, I mean, amazing about, you know.
Yeah, that new album is crazy. Huge fan.
Yeah, it's brilliant. So and then I went the opposite way, because I've already had a couple of like lyres and stuff, because I was like interested in like really learning these things, you know. So my focus went more into to like really learning what's this really all about, and they kept that spirit from when we started going with their like funny, really cool shows, and you know, because that's entertainment, you know. So that's when I really went into getting the proper instruments and the replicas, like those guys back there, and learn the stories behind them, and start to teach properly about it. I've always been talking about it on markets, but that's when I really started going deep into like get the proper information about it, which was hard back then, you know.
Yeah, right. Again, you couldn't just Google it. You had to just actually, you know, sit down and read something.
yeah. There was a couple of people that has been doing this. I mean, music archaeology in Norway didn't exist before like 78. You know.
Yep.
They didn't even register instrument findings, you know.
That's so really frustrating for someone like me who studies Norwegian music history, and I'm sitting here like, where are the findings?
Yeah, exactly. So there was this guy who made who actually traveled Norway registering instruments that they found back in, I think he released this book in 78. And then this Swedish lady, Kajsa Lund, which has, I mean, she's like a goddess in this, you know. And then she really, she's been yeah, what she's been doing for music archaeology, I mean, you have no idea, you know,
Hell
it's
yeah.
crazy. Yeah, and then so there's a couple of them in Scandinavia that has done really good research, and they were my sources of knowledge, because
Mhm.
that was the only sources available back then, you know.
Right.
And then I started to contact different kind of luthiers to help me make these instruments, because people didn't, you know,
Mhm.
nobody made this kind of instruments.
Yeah.
Or there were a couple of like people around in Europe who had made some lyres and stuff, but they were like old guys, and they weren't really interested in making more instruments, you know. They
Mhm.
did it because, you know, for their own thing. So it was a journey. Nowadays you can get a lyre anywhere, you know.
Yeah, you go onto Etsy and you just like pick a lyre and just hope that it's good. Like,
Yeah,
and you know, it's the a completely different way of getting these instruments than you're describing.
yeah,
Both
because
of these, like Alyssa found this one on Etsy, and then I got this one from the same. She gave this to me as a birthday present, and then this one I got for myself from the same maker.
yeah,
Like that's how easy it is. I just have to like open up the internet and be like, this one, please.
mhm, yeah. Yeah, yeah, it was hard, and it took a lot of time, and it took a lot of money and focus and energy and studying to get all the proper drawings and send them to
Mhm.
the luthiers and say, get them to understand that, no, I don't want you to make me a violin, you know. I want you to make this really simple thing I sent you. And they were like, yeah, but is this even an instrument, you know?
Oh man, so was that tension sort of what led you to eventually start making some of your own instruments? Because I know you've made
Yeah,
some of your own instruments.
yeah, that and the fact that I was a broke young guy doing biking markets, you know.
That'll do it too.
Yeah.
So what was the first instrument you made?
I started making, I made all sorts of weird, crazy things and didgeridoos and those
Okay.
kind of things in the 90s. But I made a lot of drums back in the days. And the
Mhm.
drum I'm using live when I do my song Galder today is actually still the first drum I ever made back in the 90s.
Yeah, and
And
what
it's
was its
still,
name again?
huh?
Didn't it have a name?
Yeah, Bomma.
Boom.
Bomma, yeah. It actually comes from the word runebomme, which is the word for the Sami drum, which is a different kind of
Oh,
drum, by the way.
okay. I was thinking
So
boom boom. Like
yeah,
yeah,
exactly, because it works, you know. It
it
says
works
boom
very
boom,
well.
and it also means ancient drum that was used for like deeper kind of work, you know.
Mhm. Yep.
Yeah. So that's why the name.
Awesome. So is your favorite instrument in your collection the organistrum?
At the moment, I think so. Or
Is that because it's
also,
also the newest?
yeah, it's, I think it's still the newest. Yeah, it doesn't last for long, but yeah, my Kravik library is also a big favorite though. But yeah, the Organistrum is, I love that one at the moment.
Hell yeah, yeah. I'm currently saving up some money to get a Craviclear from the luthier you recommended to me, because
Yeah,
I
it's fun.
absolutely want one. Can you tell us a little bit more about the organistrum, because that seems to be like you have a lot of I would call arcane instruments. You have a lot of like really old instruments you don't see many places. But when I opened up Instagram one day and just saw this picture of this giant friggin' hurdy-gurdy looking thing that needs two people to operate or whatever, I was really intrigued. So do you want to tell us a little bit more about the organistrum?
Yeah. Uh, as a startup, one of the big things about making like his authentic historical instrument music, which is impossible really, but
Mhm.
making it with authentic sounds like the Ferd album and this kind
Mhm.
of thing is that there are no bass instruments. You can get a lot of bass tagelharpes and stuff, but you know they weren't there back then.
Mhm.
That's a
Right.
modern thing. They were
Mhm.
small and they were like gneeky and high pitched, you know.
Yeah.
So they didn't really have bass instruments until the organistrum came around, and there's no really old findings of an instrument. What we do have is a few carvings
Mhm.
in rocks. Amongst others, so mine is based on a rock carving from a northern Spanish church,
Cool.
which is dated to the to like late 11, early 1200s, which is absolutely brilliant. It's a big stone portal, and you have a full orchestra with 24 musicians playing different instruments. You know, and
that's so cool.
Yeah, and in the middle there's these two guys with an organistrum. There's one guy sitting, you know, with the organistrum on his lap, turning the wheel, and there's this other guy sitting beside him and lifting this, you know, keys, because you had to lift them up, and when you drop them, they'd fall down again, you know.
Yeah.
So the string was here, and then you had this mechanism, so you like lift it up to the string to shorten it. So that's why I had to be two people. And I've been searching for one of those for so many years. I'm not the first one to get them. I mean, if you're into like fantasy music in Europe, you probably heard about like bands like Corvus Corax and this kind of bands.
Oh, they have one?
They used one a lot back in the days. I'm not sure if they do it anymore, but back in the days, that's where I saw it the first time, really.
Okay.
And then I started to search for it, and I found this really not so good quality, but very interesting videos about these people studying it, doing like church concerts, playing ancient medieval ballads with it, you know. So I searched around for a long time, and nobody makes them. You know? Nobody makes them, and those who made them before was like, nah, yeah, no, I did it back then, but you know, I'm too old now anyway. So. And then all of a sudden, I got in touch with this Russian instrument luthier, goes by the funny name Handmaidovich.
Oh, that guy! He followed me, and I followed him back. And I feel like I should talk to him because I've seen him pop up. I've seen his name pop up everywhere. Yeah.
He makes a lot of instruments, and he sent me a video of a guy playing an organistrum that he made, and I was like, okay, so I'm ordering one. And it went just a couple of weeks before he sent it, and then it took like almost a year before it finally arrived. And it was such a horrible made instrument. You have no idea. It was almost not playable at all. I'm not sure if it was just because it was poorly built or because it's been in a box in the Russian post system for a year.
Yeah.
Almost. But my friend Donald, which I recommended to you, he spent weeks trying to recreate it. So what's left of that instrument is the box, and everything else is remade. You know?
Okay.
And now it's finally working. No.
Oh, awesome! Yeah, and so as a tuba player, you're like, I need a bass instrument in here. I can't just be playing high pitched all the time.
Yeah, you always need, you know, it's music doesn't get very interesting if you don't have any bass, and you know, making this kind of music, the only bass I had was the drums, you know.
Yep.
So you need something to fill in, because you need something in the middle and the bottom of the music. If not, it's gonna sound horrible.
Yep, you are validating me as a bassist. I'm feeling very validated right now.
but you know, people really don't know how important the bass is in music, you know,
until you take it away, and then everyone's like, why does this sound bad?
Exactly. And you can hear it on Fad, because I didn't have the organistrum when I made Fad, so you can hear that the only bass I have there is really the drums, you know. And on one of the songs, I actually added a double bass in there because I really needed something more, you know, because it is a little bit empty, you know.
It is. I mean, you go to any concert, you know, I'm not gonna, you know, because backing tracks are a little controversial to bring up, so I'm not going to name specific bands that use them, but you know, you go to any live concerts, that's not the drum making that huge vibrating noise that fills up the valley, right? Like at Midgardsploot, you know, people would hit this drum that's just, you know, this big around, and it would be reverberating across the town. Like that's, you need a little something extra to push that in, or else it just sounds empty, especially in front of a crowd of 5,000 people.
Exactly.
Yeah. This a little studio magic is a little important.
It is. And also because, you said we're coming back to the albums, so we can take that then. But yeah, so
we can move on to the albums now.
Okay. Because that's the thing with like, especially with the Fard album I did, because I really restrained myself for that one, because I'm there is like 98% of the sounds you can hear is authentic Viking Age music instrument, you know, or
Yeah.
instruments available back in those days, which is pretty hard to make, you know. So the two others is that one double bass on one song and a native flute. So, and the rest of it is actually from that collection there, you know.
Oh, that's so awesome. So Fared, if I remember correctly, Fared was the result of you went on a trip abroad. Am I remembering correctly? Like, did you go somewhere?
No, not really. Actually, FAD was a result of many things.
Okay.
I went through some really dark times. I lost pretty much everything. I lost my family. I lost my house, my studio. I lost my job. I lost pretty much everything.
Okay.
My life was pretty rubbish for a couple of years.
Well, I'm glad to see you're doing a lot better.
yeah, I'm doing great.
Yeah.
So, but then I figured that, you know, I can't continue. I mean, I need to do something about this, you know.
Yep.
And then I started to go through and thought that, you know, I always did so much music until I ended up and I choose to be in a family. I didn't create small humans myself, but I have some small humans I call my kids, you know.
Yeah.
and I've been to two family situations for quite some time, and when I'm in this situation, I mean, I'm not a big musician in this way, you know. It's I never made much money on it, but it takes a lot of time, you know.
Yep.
So I stopped doing music as I usually did when I was with families. And then yeah, I did some, you know, some gigs with Vardruna and these kind of things, but it was like occasionally things. And then when I stood there and I went through this, like, what am I doing with my life now? You know, and then it appeared to me that I can really restart. You know, I can get back into being me, or you do what I think I'm meant to do. You know. So then I went into the archive of pieces I created for like documentary movies about Viking Age and such things, and I started to pick together pieces, and then, you know, the journey, or ferd, which means journey, kind of appeared to me, because I've been making a lot of music to like documentary movies about Viking Age, and I've always been fascinated about music from around the globe. And for me, one of the main aspects of studying Viking Age music is, where did this come from? Because almost nothing of this kind of instruments or music came from Scandinavia. Most of it came from China, from Africa, from the Middle East, you know. Like the lyres, they come from the Middle East. Some of the, what we today would call cantelis, they came from China. Some of the drums came from Africa, you know. And they and then this concept kind of got together in front of me, you know, like, okay, I'm gonna make a authentic Viking sound album about these journeys, about where this music came from, and about where they went, and how this could have been, which is the story of the Ferd album, really.
Yeah, it's a beautiful. I really appreciate that you bring this up, because I actually even I'm hoping to give one of the Mimir talks about this at Midgardsblot next year. And I might even ask you to, if I might even ask you to join me on that, because one of the big problems one of the tough parts of this is, whenever people want to know about traditional music, they want to know, what music did I'll just say the way that people usually word the question: what music did the Vikings make on their own? What is their music? And me, as an ethnomusicologist, I hear that question and it makes me because, like, that's not how music works. Like, unless you're in a special community on an island that was completely cut off from the rest of humanity for hundreds of years. Iceland? Yeah. Iceland. Music ideas are always exchanged, just like any other idea. And so when people are, and this is something I really would love to talk about, especially with the Nabala album that you did, because sorry to try to focus my thoughts here because I have a tendency to jump around.
Yeah, as you see,
Oh,
I do that too. So
okay, cool. I'm in good company. So I want to I want to think of a way to communicate or educate on the fact that the Vikings, we one of the things we find so interesting about them is they went all the way from Canada to Baghdad to North Africa, and that fascinates us. But for some reason, that fascination with this global approach to trade and cultural exchange doesn't
Mhm.
appear in the music, right? People are really concerned with, I want to know what just the Vikings did with music.
Yeah,
And I love that this Fared album and Nabala opens up the conversation to, well, if they went to North Africa, if they went to Spain, if they were in Byzantium, if they were in the Caliphate of Baghdad, that means
yeah,
they were also hearing music from all of those places. And we
yeah,
know the Vikings love to bring back toys. We know that they loved picking up toys, bringing them back. Why not an
yeah,
instrument?
yeah.
It's entirely likely that at least one Viking brought back like an aulos flute from Greece.
Of
And
course.
so I just love that with that album and with Nabala's newest album, which you worked on as well. I love
Mhm.
that the work you're doing is opening up this conversation to reminding us that, and this is even sort of what Heilung's point was with their last album, that
Yeah.
with Drift. Um, the Nordic society didn't exist in this little bubble in
No,
terms of culture.
no.
They're hearing ideas from all these places and bringing them back home,
Mm.
and that's what I love about your music and the music you did with Nabala is people are calling this stuff Viking music and it's being played at Midgard's Bloat and stuff like that. Um, but people are hearing like Tibetan singing bowls. People are hearing zithers. It's I think it's really fascinating that you're doing this sort of thing to open up the conversation to where
Yeah.
else, what other sorts of music. It's not all just minor. It's not
No,
all
no,
depressing, moody. I
no,
love that you're doing
exactly.
that.
Yeah, and to me, I've been trying to open this conversation in Scandinavia for many years. I
Hmm.
always talk about this when I do my lectures because I mean it's the basic of what I'm talking about. I mean
Hmm.
these instruments, I mean the lyres, they're not from here. They
Hmm.
came from the Middle East, you know.
Hmm.
And if you go back in history, there you can find them thousands of years back there, you know.
Hmm.
And most of the instruments we had up here has their origin. I mean, like the bronze lures and these things, they're
Hmm.
from Rome, you know, and most of it came from other places. And it's pretty simple because the climate up here was pretty awful, you know. It was
Yeah.
a hard life living up here. I mean, it was cold, it was windy, it was wet, it must have been quite horrible, really, you know.
Hmm.
And so we had to spend, I mean, we had handcrafters out of this world. I mean, what they could make is amazing, but
Hmm.
they still had to spend a lot of time keeping warm, keeping dry, getting food, you know.
Hmm.
Most people had to be hunters and fishermen, you know, while in like the Middle East, they had a completely different climate,
Hmm.
you know, so they didn't have to spend that time keeping warm and dry.
Yeah,
So
or
they
even
could
just the
take
materials.
exactly. So they could take that time and they could use it to create like culture or yeah, obviously we had culture too, but
Yeah.
like art and music and instrument and this kind of things, you know.
Hmm.
So it really makes sense. And
Yeah.
also, if you go into the fact of recent, you know, those of us who have been doing this for a long time, we knew this already, but a couple of years ago, they did a really huge research on this, and they took DNAs from more than 400 skeletons from Vikings all around the world
Hmm.
to see like what can we find here, and what they find is that the Viking world, like Scandinavia in Viking age, it was a pretty damn multicultural society,
Yeah.
you know.
That's the lesson that me and Matthias are constantly trying to drill into our students here.
Yeah,
Because a lot of the students take this class called the Vikings because they like the TV show or they
yeah,
like the movies or they like the video games and they come into it
yeah,
with all these ideas of what it was like. And then one of the most satisfying parts of our job is just turning that completely upside down.
exactly.
It's really satisfying, and that's what you're doing with music. I
Yeah,
mean, like what you're bringing up is, you know, a whole bunch of like cultural, not even just cultural reasons, but just lifestyle reasons that, you know, if you live in a warmer climate and it's much more forgiving, right? You brought up, you have the time to make the instruments, but then also if you're in Norway in the year 790, and you have some metal, you're not
Yeah,
going to make a toy out of it. You're going to make a tool out of it that you need to survive. Meanwhile, someone in a warmer climate might have the luxury of saying, you know what, I'm going to make a bell out of this. So
exactly.
it's so complex, the reason why there are or aren't instrument
Yeah,
finds where there aren't. And especially like Iceland, you made the joke about Iceland out in the middle of nowhere. The
yeah,
reason, and this is another thing that we forget to think about sometimes, is the climate itself. If I leave this thing in my car overnight,
yeah.
it takes me forever to tune it back because I deserve it because I was an idiot. But think about what happens in in Iceland in 990. If you have the string instrument made out of wood, you don't have
Yeah.
central heating. You,
No,
those instruments aren't gonna work well.
no,
So that's why a lot more of the music is vocal, is because you don't have to worry about your voice. As long as you're alive, your voice will work.
exactly,
So yeah, I
exactly.
love that you're bringing this up. So so you approach music from a very cross-cultural perspective, and I think that
Yeah,
that's incredibly important. Um,
it is.
so
I've also
when oh
been
yep.
working a lot with these things. I've been working in a really I've been working a lot with integration of young people into the Nordic society, because
Mhm.
it's different up here. You know, it's hard to come from like Afghanistan to try to
Yep.
figure out this place up here. You know, because
Mhm.
it's so different. And we have this concept called fargespill, which means game of colors, really,
Mhm.
which is an absolutely brilliant thing. I was part of starting up a division of this down in the eastern part of the country many
Mhm.
years ago. And the concept is that it's always free to be part of this. In Norway, much of the cultural things for kids costs money,
Mhm.
because we're rich, so everything costs money, you know.
Yeah.
But but it's the same in the US, right?
Oh,
So
very much so.
yeah, but this project, the whole concept is that it needs to be free, because then you reach those people who really needs to get into this.
Mhm.
And what we do is that the approach is that you meet these new people coming to our country with like, all right, welcome here. And what do you bring to my world that is
Mhm.
beautiful, that you can teach me?
Mhm.
And then I can teach you something from mine. And the concept is about music, dance, games. So my job as a musical leader of this project, or my little division of this project, was to gather all these songs and dances and games that they learned from their moms or grandmothers or
Mhm.
whatever, from their culture, and then we put it into this big kettle together, and we stirred it around, and together with the children we created new music from this, you know. So
Mhm.
it could be a traditional Norwegian song with like Persian beats and Chinese tonality, you know.
Mhm.
And it was absolutely amazing to work
That
with
is
this thing.
so cool. I love that.
Yeah. So yeah, I've been working a lot with the different kind of music styles from around the world, playing like different weird instruments. Like in this concept, whenever we had a solist on stage of these kids doing something from their culture, I
Mhm.
had this thing that I put to myself, because I find it interesting, that I needed to be there with them, supporting them by playing one instrument from their culture on stage.
Oh, that's so great.
Yeah, and it's also about, you know, showing that respect, you know.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm there's a question I really want to ask you, but it's a thorny topic, and like the topic bores me, but I feel like it has to be had, right? Do you
Mm.
ever experience people bringing up cultural appropriation with you? And if so, what are your thoughts on it? Because I'll just to open it up to, so you know, my stance on it first. So I'll open myself up to whatever internet person wants to get mad at me first. Um, I the cultural appropriation is absolutely a problem that happens around the world, right? And it's an issue, but I feel like it's a little more gray with music, because as we've been talking, right, like music is an idea that's traded because humans are naturally interested in one another. They might hate a person from a different place while simultaneously being interested in the things they do. It's a really weird dynamic that happens. And something I found is I have a professor here named Austin Akigbo. He's from Nigeria and he studies Nigerian music. He's on the side of, he doesn't trust any of the conversation that happens with cultural appropriation of music. He believes that it's a basic human behavior to exchange ideas. If you hear a sound you like, you're not going to say, oh, I can't take that. It's just a part of being a person. If you go somewhere and hear a cool sound, you want to imitate it. And so I think that in a lot of ways, the work you do is also brave, because there are people who would absolutely want to jump down your throat for introducing other cultures' sounds into your own music. But at least from my point of view, yeah, that's why I don't want to like bring up like flashbacks for you or anything,
but it is important. And a long time ago, I did make a decision about this, because it is important to say it. It is important to bring this up. And there's so many bands today doing this kind of Viking music thing, you know, but nobody really says it. I mean, Einar is quite clear about these things. Heilung clearly know where they stand. But it's important to just put it straight out, you know, this is how it was. I mean, this is history. History is like this. So end of this discussion, you know, this is what happened. I mean, the Vikings were a multicultural society and they brought music back from where they went. I mean, that's how it was. There's nothing more to it, you know.
Yeah, there was no one policing like, hey, put that instrument back. You don't own it. And I had this really funny experience to me around the drum circle at Midgardsblot, where you have there was a guy named Manuel. I don't know if you met him. He was playing a dundun at the campfire, an African dundun, but then his friend Bots was playing a bagpipe, and someone else was doing their own dance, and it's so many of these different cultural things coming together. And I imagined that your typical ethnomusicologist would be wearing this orange vest, walk around like, put that down, that's not yours, you can't touch that, stop playing this melody, you can't use that scale. And that's the climate that ethnomusicology is in. And so the reason that I want to have your opinion on this is because I feel like you and I are in agreement about just like this cultural exchange being just a part of human behavior. And I feel like it is something we have to talk about. But I feel like it's not the black and white issue that a lot of people want it to be, because, you know, then when I feel like it's even more problematic to fence people in and say, you stay here and you stay there and don't interact with each other, okay? Or else you're going to be in very big trouble. So I'm glad that you were open to talking about that, because I feel like that's, as you said, it needs to be talked about.
Yeah, and for me, it's like there's a couple of sides to what I do. One of the things I do is to try to teach about how was this. I mean, this instrument was found there, it's dated to this, and it probably originates from there, which is like, you know, that part of it. But when I make music, I mean, there are a couple of really, really good projects that tries to recreate what might have been back in the Viking Age. But to me, that's not so interesting. They're there and they're interesting. Their work is interesting. I really respect what they're doing, and I really appreciate that they're doing, because it means a lot to me in what I do. But I'll never go there. For me as a musician, that's not what it's about. When I create music, I do something else. You know, I find inspiration from it, and I find it really interesting to work with these instruments, because, you know, there's so much you can't do with this instrument.
Right? Yeah. It's the limitations. It's good. It helps creativity. Exactly. At least in my perspective,
really fascinating. Yeah, so I'm going into this using these sounds that they have, and then I obviously put it into a modern view with reverbs and, you know, put it. So I combine this, and for me, I mean, I could bring my lyre, and I would love to play with an African band with my lyre, you know. Because to me, that's also being authentic, because that's what really happened, you know.
Yeah,
that's
it is.
Music evolved.
Absolutely. Kjell, thank you for sharing your thoughts on that, because again, I think it's a very important conversation to have, and I really appreciate your point of view on it. Because yeah, it's just music is what people do. No one's gonna be like, oh, hold on, my name tag isn't on this music, so I can't touch it. But and it's interesting because you can assume why, but like no one ever gives me shit for playing Norwegian music. I'm not Norwegian, but it's just it's just a weird climate, and I guess it is what it is for now. So Nibala, before I want to end on talking about your album, because I think I think it's probably my favorite album of the year.
Wow.
From the Nordic music scene. I mean that genuinely. So I want to end on that. So before we get to that, I just talked with, I've gotten to know Jonas pretty well over the last few months. I met him in Wyoming when he was at Fire in the Mountains. He was the brisket chef. So I met him through Matthias, and then saw him again at Midgardsblot, and then I just had him on for an interview last week, and he was talking about how you were actually a pretty big part of Nibala, and I saw you on stage. You were having a lot of fun there, but he at least from what he told me, you offered a lot to that experience, even though it seems to be Jonas's baby. You absolutely add a lot to that album, and I can tell, especially from like that cross-cultural approach to making music. What was this project like for you, especially with the emphasis on like an Indian soundscape from Jonas's own, family heritage and stuff like that?
It actually started before that, because I was doing my Ferd album, and Binors got to me about the Ferd album, and then I started to really go into like, and that was still pretty early in the Binors, not in Binors, but in Binors getting new bands, So I was like the fifth project signed to that label or something,
Yeah. Cool.
Yeah. And then they released this EP without, I never heard about this project Nibala, and I put it on, and it totally blew my mind off,
Yep.
I absolutely loved it,
Yeah.
It is one of the most interesting things I've heard out of this scene of music. So I had this thing that like I really want to meet this guy and make music with him. I didn't know at that time that he used to be in Heilung with Maria and Christopher, because I had no clue who this guy was. And then he met into this. You probably talked about this, with the Corona and all of that.
Yeah, he talked about his whole journey into Nibala with us, and then I'm glad that so I'm glad that you're bringing up just how new it was, because by the time this interview is on YouTube, I will also have a review of that album on YouTube. And in that review, I talk a whole bunch about just how what blew me away about that album was just how new it was, how unique it was. So it's really funny to me hearing, you helped work on it after this experience, and you felt the same way even before you worked on it. That's great.
I did, because it was, and I'm serious, it totally blew my mind off, and his voice, I mean, his voice.
It's almost creepy how much time I spend talking about how much I love Jonas's voice. It has to make him uncomfortable, because sometimes I feel creepy, but at the same time I'm like, it has to be said. He has an incredible voice. Thank you for making me feel less weird about how much I love his voice.
Yeah, but I do. I mean, wow. I've never ever worked with anyone even close to what he was capable of showing off in that studio. I mean, it keeps blowing my mind every time we work,
This album is funded by Jonas Lorentzen. This podcast is funded by Jonas Lorentzen.
So and then all of a sudden he called me and said, like, I'm looking for someone to help me produce an album. And I was like, all right, we will try to fix that.
Yeah.
So but as you see, I don't have a big studio. This is like, it's not big enough for recording such a thing. So I teamed up with Jonas, and we went to Don, the luthier's place, which is like 15 minutes from here, because I just helped him to rebuild his old barn into a studio and a luthier's shop.
Oh, so cool.
Yeah, so we went there into this beautiful little cabin with this amazing view. I mean, he owns paradise, that guy. With his own private lake and the mountains.
Good.
It's like
he deserves it.
yeah. So we met up there, and I never met Jonas before, and we just went in the studio, and I met him like I normally do with the studio customers as a producer, and I tried to keep my views down, to keep his views up, and we did some good stuff going in the studio, and made something really beautiful. And then the next time we met, he came to me and he said, like, maybe we should have a different approach to this, and maybe we should try to make it more of a cooperation.
He told me at first that it seemed like you wanted to just, stay in your lane as the producer, and he was like, I wanted him more. I wanted to bring more out of him. That's how he told me the story. Yeah, it just seems funny where you.
Yeah, and I was quite happy about that, because I really wanted to join in. As a producer, you could. Many producers just go on and they just drive you down with their own thoughts,
Yeah.
And when I'm producing something, my job is to help someone create what's in their mind, But then all of a sudden we ended up, and then the song Alagabia came that same day,
Yeah.
So we composed and recorded that song that day,
Awesome. That track does such a good job of setting up what you're going to expect for the rest of the album. So hell yeah.
Yeah, and that was like the proper start of Jonas and my cooperation with Nibala, So from going from like being like artist and producer to being like a team, and awesome. I'm so happy about it, because I mean the way I get to explore my things with Jonas, because we have such similar thoughts about this, but we have such different backgrounds, and it's absolutely amazing to work with the guy. And about his voice, I never ever experienced anyone that can come into the studio and say that, I have this melody, so you can make a drone, and then I make some drone so we can listen to it, and he sings the melody, and then he's like, yeah, okay, one more and one more and one more, and he just sings like 8 different voices with different layers and different tonality, and then it's done. It's first take. Most of the voices on that album is first take,
He's one of those damn talented people that I hate so much. He's
but it's absolutely amazing to work with him, it's mind-blowing.
Was I still remember the first time I heard, is it the track Safian, where he just has this vocal solo? I think and I remember I put the album on, I have better headphones that I put on for when I'm listening to an album, and I got to that point and his voice just flies.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting like, what am I listening to? I've never heard anyone sing like this before. And that's, to me, that's a lot of what it's even in first take a lot of the times. Oh my God, man. That guy...
was how I heard him the first time, because Safian was the first song I heard, because Safian is on that first EP,
Yeah.
The songs on the album was on that EP, so we just we just mix it over and change a little bit on them, but they're pretty much the same. And it was just, when that track started, I was just like, wow, what am I listening to?
If I was in your position, I'd be like, you want my help? Yeah, I think you're fine without me. It sounds like you've got it handled.
So that's it's been such a joy to do that, and it's such an honor to be part of that project, because I absolutely love his views on why he do this, and his knowledge about things, and how deep he goes into what he's doing. I mean, it's an honor to be part of it. Really.
Ah, that's so awesome. Do you have a favorite track on the album?
Yeah, pretty much all of them, really. But I really like I really, really like Safian.
Mhm,
I think Alagabia has something really amazing going on. I
mhm.
really like it, but that's also, it's hard to defer, personal, because
Right.
yeah, and but I also like Brutha and they
Mhm,
all have different views and different
mhm.
things. So I pretty much like them all in different ways.
Yeah, my absolute favorite track on the album is Lathu. For me, that's the
Yeah,
track, I put on the album for.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
I need the whole ramp up from Alagabia into Lathu.
yeah,
Alyssa has walked in on me like when that chorus kicks in after the break, and it's just like
yeah,
the
yeah,
sky opens up. Alyssa has turned the corner. Alyssa has turned the corner into me just standing like this, just listening to it, and she'll like just slowly back out of the room. Like,
yeah.
and I'm like, man,
I
it's
mean, huge. That's huge.
oh yeah, and then but then you just can't beat how much fun Sergio Sibu is. And
I,
I have a feeling that you had quite a bit to do with that track because it's just a lot of it, like the groove that goes on, just reminds me so much of your music.
yeah, yeah, thanks. Yeah. Well, yeah. I'm in there.
Yeah, I just remember when they did that, when you guys did that song live,
Yeah.
and Jonas and I'm pretty sure Josh was doing it too, that like throat singing beatbox thing, and I just remember like, what am I watching? And I'm looking around and everyone is just like, hell yeah. And
Yeah.
the whole audience is moving, right?
Yeah.
And that is just such a special moment for me, is just because you don't hear anything like Sergio Sibu at the rest of that festival. It's
No.
just like this, blah, 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 blah. And he's just, I love it. It's just so much fun. It
Yeah.
doesn't, I'm a huge fan of music that is really strikingly well done while not taking itself too seriously. And I feel
Mhm.
like Nabala strikes that balance very well. Uh,
Yeah,
so
that's exactly what we were aiming for.
cool. Well, hell yeah, mission accomplished.
Yeah. So,
So
so for me, it's like Nabala is like a big room for playing and experimenting and finding like new, with his knowledge and his ideas about what to end up with, and then go into that. It's amazing.
yeah, very talented. Incredible project. I hope everyone listening and watching checks out that album if they haven't already, because definitely a unique experience. It's worth having. So let's talk about Blota. I have a very special relationship with this album. Um,
Mhm.
the all of the airports. So first off, you know the feeling of like when the festival is over and you're just depressed. It's just like, I don't want that to be over, and you just feel real down. And
Yeah.
so I'm feeling that way while sitting in the Oslo airport for like 5 hours.
Oh,
I had to pack up my campsite at 5 a.m. to be on the bus, and I was up for the
oh,
whole High Lung
God.
show. So I was on no sleep. Pack it up. I'm sitting in. I'm sitting in the airport, and I put on Bluta on for the first time. I hadn't heard the album before, and I'm
Mhm.
sitting there like, okay, this is making me forget I'm in an airport. I really like this. And what struck me about it is, similarly to my experience with Benny's music for the first time with Folket Borte for Nordavinden, is you
Mhm.
guys have this remarkable way of making intimate music that,
Mhm.
and I'm pretty sure I might have told you, I can't remember if I told you or Benny this comment, but Vardruna and Heilung do grand very well. They're very good at creating this huge grand performance that pulls you in.
Yeah.
What you do differently, which I really appreciate, is the fact that, and Alyssa is the one who said this comment first, of
Mhm.
all of the music at this festival, your music and Folket Bortevor Nordavinden's music is music that I can actually imagine playing around a fire.
Yeah.
It actually creates this very intimate space, right? So that's the atmosphere that sets up with that album. But then
Mhm.
here's where my relationship with it gets more interesting.
Mhm.
We were pretty sure that there was some sort of bomb threat for the airport because extra security, they turned off all Wi-Fi on the plane for the 8-hour plane ride. So,
Oh my.
but for some reason, your album was still loaded up on Spotify. And so for the whole 8-hour plane ride, all I had to listen to was Blota.
Oh
And so
my.
I listened to that album, I just had my headphones in and I just had it on repeat, and it just kept going around and around and around. I wasn't getting tired of it.
Wow.
And so that album I was listening to, and I was, in this emotionally vulnerable state of, in that post Midgard's bloat feeling.
Yeah.
And I just remember just like I got really emotional listening to it, especially it might have been Soul. I think it was Soul, or
Mhm.
Freether. One of those tracks I just got really emotional in that, because maybe it was the sleep deprivation, maybe it was the lack of things to do on a plane for 8 hours, but this album showed me a different side of this genre that I hadn't been that familiar with. Because even with Nabala, it's pretty grand, right? But
Yeah.
this more, it sounds like you are playing music for me, for the listener.
Yeah.
Um, and it pulled me into the space that made me completely rethink how music can be made. And then I listened to your interview with Matthias and Dan about how you made the album. And you were one of the first musicians to open my eyes to this sort of music that's a ritual for yourself that you also invite other people into. Because then after I listened to that, I went into Runehild and then Folket Bortevor Nordavinden. So you sort of opened up the floodgates for me into this more
Wow.
intimate side of Nordic music. And
Yeah.
I'll shut up in a second, and then hand it off to you. But I don't know if you saw the video I posted of me playing banjo. Um, I it's okay if you didn't. You're a busy guy.
Yeah.
I posted a
I
video where
haven't been got time to be online much
yeah,
lately.
don't that's good. That's good. I was just asking because I didn't know if you know what I'm talking about or not. But I recently decided, just like you seem to have a few years ago with Faird, that I had developed this really rocky relationship with music while being a music student. Um,
Yeah.
and your album was the first album that made me actually face that reality.
Wow.
And so your album actually Blota actually helped put me on a different path with a better relationship with music.
Wow.
So like being more honest with myself and you know accepting that it might not be perfect, but it's my music.
Mhm.
And so that's the attitude I'm in. I'm recording an EP right now, playing like a weird hybrid of Nordic banjo. Because I'm
Right.
a band.
I look forward to that.
I play clawhammer banjo, where I have this really long pointer
Mhm.
fingernail, and you use it to hit the string. It's how they play it in Africa.
Yeah.
And I tuned it like a tal harpa. I tuned my banjo like a tal harpa, and I've just been playing these Nordic scales. And even Matthias was like, "Okay, that's pretty neat." And I'm like, "Okay, so if I have the Matthias, like the most cynical guy in the world, saying this is neat, I'm probably onto something here." Uh,
Yeah.
and over time, I just put up a teaser for the music video I did for it, and it's the first time that I've really been respecting myself as a musician.
Mhm.
And I just needed to take this moment to thank you for your appreciation. I wanted to voice my appreciation for you, because it was your album that sort of made me realize I needed to do something about my relationship with music. So that's the special relationship I have with your album before we talk about it, because I just needed to get my biases out on the table here. This is a very
Wow.
special album to me. Um,
That's that's such an honor. I mean,
yeah,
wow.
I'm being completely honest here. I like to be as genuine as possible. That I think it's a very powerful album that helped. I remember the first time I showed Alyssa the album, she was dead silent the whole time she was listening to it. It's a very special experience, and so that's why I'm dying to hear the backstory to it, because I haven't heard much. You talked about it a little bit with Matthias and Dan, but you know how they are.
Yeah.
They derail themselves very easily into jokes and all that. So
Yeah.
so there are a couple of knuckleheads. So I would love for you to just tell me, what was your creative vision going into this album,
Mhm.
and sort of what was the journey like?
It's um, it was a pretty difficult album, really,
Mhm.
and to release Bluta is one of the hardest things I've ever done, really, because
Mhm.
it's so damn honest.
That's what I love about it. That's what I love about it. It's honest. It's so stripped down, and it's like just you.
Yeah.
That's what's so. That's what I love about it, man. So yeah.
Yeah. So the start of Bluta probably started with Ferd, really, with me trying to rise up from this really, really, really dark place that I was for a few years.
Mhm.
And then I started to make Ferd, which I created into a project much bigger than I ever kind of imagined. I mean, you seen the cover of Ferd?
Yeah.
I mean, I was cooperating with so many people at the same time with that album. I mean, there's 20 people in cooperation on that album, you know,
Okay.
with art, you know, every single song has their own picture painted by a different artist, you know, and one of the reasons I did this was that it was in the start of the pandemic, and people were really, really struggling around. And I was damn lucky. I live on this little island, or it's not little, it's a big island, but it's, you know, in Norway, and we were pretty free, you know, I can walk the forest, I can, you know, and I started to put out photos on Instagram from my trips around, you know, in the mountains or in the forests and by the sea, and people were like, well, please, can you continue, because we're not allowed to leave our flat. Can you, you know, you're really helping out here. And then I started to reach out to interesting artists that some of them are friends of mine, some I never talked to before, saying that, you know, I see you're struggling now. Would you like to join in for a project? So these are the start of the songs I have, and choose a song and make art for it, you know, make it yours. And then I started, and then Norse contacted me. I didn't actually contact them. I obviously I know them through Einar and my work with Vardruna and this, but so they actually got in touch with me saying that, you know, we want to release this album, and then, you know, things started rolling. So that said, I also started to see that, okay, what more can I do for people? And I started making a video series on YouTube. Which is really, it's kind of funny. It's really, really stripped down, because I was here, I didn't have a team. I just went up to my friend Donald, and I borrowed one of his houses that he built, like a firehouse that it looks a little bit like a Vikingish house, you know. And I brought my phone and my iPad and whatever equipment I had, and I started creating new music. So I released a new song every week.
Are these the YouTube videos where you make it so that there's like 4 of you? Yeah,
exactly.
Okay, cool. I love this.
Yeah, so I started this project to bring some joy, you know, to a world which was in like, I saw it like, I am now getting up from this darkness. My life is really getting better and better, and it's flowing now. I'm getting back to being me. So, but all of a sudden the whole world is in this dark place, so maybe I could, you know, give some of the light I'm experienced to the world, you know.
Awesome.
And then in that series, a couple of the songs are also on Blota, with different names on some of them, but you can see that it's the same songs. And for me, it's a journey. I decided, when I decided to make it into an album, I went through, because Blota for me is so much. Some of these songs has been with me since we started the band Avas back in 99. Me and Gustav and Maria and Gunnar, you know, and Thomas also, who was the guy who actually came up with the melody for Galder.
Okay.
You know? So some of these songs are actually more than 20 years old, you know, but they're like being my soul songs since that. Like Galder is it's like singing my soul, and I never came to a place where it was felt, you know, I performed this song so many times, but it never felt okay to record it, because it sticks so deep in, and then I figured that, you know, maybe I could put my journey from this dark place into this ritual that with some of these songs that I used to get out of this dark pit, you know. And then I started working with it, and I put a lot of barriers to me on working with it, because obviously I can make it this big huge thing that, you know, you heard me do that with like Nevada, and you know, but I decided I cannot do this, because this, if I'm actually recording these songs, it needs to be something that can bring something to the world, something more meaningful. Not that I'm not saying that the other bands are not meaningful,
right? Yeah.
but something, I need to put some of my soul into it, you know. So I restrained myself to like, okay, I can be like a 4-piece band maximum, you know. to keep it as honest and down to earth as possible. And I'm not dubbing any drums with sample libraries or anything, which we didn't do with Nabala either, by the way.
Yeah. They probably don't have samples of those weird drums you used anyway, so I believe you.
No, exactly. So I just made it really honest, and I kept the production really simple to I mean, you can hear me singing out of tune, and because
that's what strikes you about it. It's and I mean this from the greatest place of respect. The imperfection of it is something that I think is so important, because so many musicians get, especially my generation, are brought up to expect this sort of perfection from themselves, without acknowledging the fact that perfection comes from the studio. I feel like, again, I'm going to use the word brave. I feel like it's really brave and really inspiring of you to let yourself be that raw, to be that imperfect, because that actually adds a whole layer of interest, of emotion into the record. And that absolutely comes through to the listener.
Yeah, it's and that's I mean, I've been doing music for like 35 years or something. Yeah. I mean, I released my first album back in '95.
Okay, I was born in '95, so yeah. So that was going to be 27 years.
Yeah, and since then I've participated on more than 100 releases.
Busy guy.
So and what comes back to me over and over and over again is that I see there's and it's a little bit black and white what I'm saying now. It's I don't mean it's that black and white, but it's to make it simple to explain. You have two types of musicians. You have artists and you have handcrafters.
Okay.
You have these perfect people playing perfect guitar solos. It's always perfect, and it never gives me anything to listen to it. It's impressive, but it doesn't speak to me.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I'm the same exact way.
Soulless to me, And I'm not saying that it's not good, because it's pretty damn good and it's really impressive, and I understand why people love it, but it doesn't speak to me.
Yeah,
because I can't feel it. It's like there's no soul, because it's so perfect. What makes music is those imperfections.
Absolutely.
If you listen to an orchestra, what makes an orchestra unique is that all these instruments are almost tuned to perfections, but they will never ever be tuned to perfection as in a sample library.
Right. That imperfection is so important.
Yeah. And so I with Bluth I kind of took it to the extreme, though.
No, I wouldn't say. I mean, maybe, yeah, it is extreme for the music business to allow yourself that level of imperfection, because something to me, I've got a whole bunch of vinyls around of old blues legends from America, right? Like Mississippi John Hurt. And, these are legendary musicians who give these legendary performances. You hold a metronome up to that, he's not on the beat.
That's why it's so good.
You hold a tuner up to him playing palette, make me down a palette on your floor, he's way out of tune. Yeah. But when you're listening to these vinyls, these records that are now in like the Library of Congress as some of the most important American albums of all time, they're imperfect front to back. And that's, there's something there to it.
They have soul.
They do. And you really, even if someone doesn't like blues, you cannot take that from old blues musicians. They've got soul. And, just the effect that listening to, I say that it was inspiring to me when I listened to your album, to Runehilds and everything. When I'm sitting down and recording this album, and I haven't recorded an album since 2014. It's been a long time for me. For the first time ever, I'm sitting down and, I get to a part in the recording where I'm like, oh, that could be cleaned up, but I'm not going to, because I'm going to leave it there. I'm going to leave it there. And what I've noticed actually is that I'm the only one who notices those mistakes, because I put up one of the final songs up on YouTube, and they've been listened to, by people I know very close. And even these people who would feel more than comfortable tell me, you made this really bad mistake here. no one notices.
Mhm.
No one notices. All they say is, this is interesting. And
Yeah.
you guys have collectively taught me that perfection is kind of not great, and it's not what I want out of the music that I make. And it
Mhm.
even makes the recording process less stressful. If I allow
Yeah.
myself mistakes, I can just do a take and be like, that's good enough. I'm fine. All right, that's gonna be fine. So
And
did
this
you
is also what I do when I sorry, I interrupt,
no,
but
please.
yeah, but when I go into the studio with a new artist that I don't know, which I
Mhm,
don't do often because I don't do rock bands and I don't
mhm,
I want to work with music that talks to me. Like I've
mhm.
been working in studio now this week with this absolutely amazing local musician Annette Aga, which makes this
Mhm.
absolutely beautiful like really low volume like Cantillon voice thingy, you
Cool.
know.
Can you say their name again?
Annette Aga. If you go to my Spotify and you go to also appears on, you will find her.
Okay, good,
Yeah,
cool. I just wanted to make sure I caught the name.
yeah. So she makes it's absolutely beautiful. I absolutely love working with her, and she does the same as me, you know, because it's so sour. It's so, you know, it's absolutely beautiful. And then I work in the studio, and when we do like vocal takes, we normally would do a few takes, and
Mhm.
and then we you know, so many artists go in and they take like every single word, you know, and they choose the best one from every take and, you know, make it perfect, you know. What we do, we listen to a verse and we say like, okay, which take has soul to it, you
Beautiful.
know,
Hmm.
and maybe there's something that really needs to be changed. Okay, so we can look into another take then, you know, but the most important part is to catch the soul of the
Hmm.
music.
Absolutely, and that's, that was one of the rules I gave for myself for this new recording project, because my very first album I ever recorded was this was back. I used to major in composition, and so I was
Mhm.
trying to put together music for that I could use for a resume for getting a soundtrack, like a job as for doing like video game soundtracks.
Yeah.
And so it was like an album of these like dorky tavern tunes. And I still remember that, as much as fun as I had playing the music, I still remember recording it being an absolute nightmare, because I was like, oh, it's imperfect, I got to redo it. And
Mhm.
then I've also, I do a lot of heavy metal. And so when I'm recording a heavy metal album, I'm just sitting there like, oh, that take has this really obvious mistake in it, and I just really can't keep that. And all of a sudden I'm playing the same riff for like 3 hours straight. And I'm like, okay, I'm done with that. But
Yeah.
this new way of doing it, like I sit down with the banjo, I do one take, and I'm like, that was good enough. I'm fine with that. And the other thing that I really like that you limit yourself to being a four-piece band is,
Mhm.
another thing is being able to say that I can play this music without like having to imagine that there's someone else also playing with me, because the music is still complete even if it's just you.
Yeah.
Right? Like, you don't need a drum machine. You don't
No.
need some sample orchestra library. But is there a particular song on Blota that, I mean, you said Galder is in your soul or in your heart. I forget how you worded it specifically, but um, was there a particular song on the album that was really, important to you, or were they all pretty much?
They're all important in different ways.
Mhm,
I think yeah, Galder is for me, but for me, Galder has been with me for so long.
mhm,
But I think maybe Syria is one of the most important, and it's also kind of the core of the whole Blut, you know,
mhm,
which is about, for those who doesn't know already, it's about, you know, going digging into this dark, deep, or sad, or, you know, this difficult and dark sides of ourselves that we
mhm,
all have. We all carry those around, and from time to time we all end up in that black pit, you know.
mhm.
So the whole aim with this Blut, or this ritual, is to go into these things, and because so many people, you know, they put it in a barrel and they put you know, they close it down, but
Yeah.
it will always haunt you back, you know.
Mhm.
So my aim is more to like, let's go into this because it is a part of us. It will never go away. We can't make these dark, hard things go away. It will always be part of us. But let's go into it. Let's accept them. Let's try to work with them, and let's try to recreate them into a resource rather than a burden. Because these dark experiences we have, you know, they will all also make us wiser. There will be a perspective of life. And if you've never seen darkness, how can you possibly know if you're doing good? You don't have a perspective to tell, you know. So it is important to accept these things. And Syria is that for me. For me, it was sorrow from losing pretty much everything I had in life, you know. It was pretty rough, pretty hard. And for me, it was sorrow. But as I explained in the cover, I won't go. I didn't want to go into my sorrow, because the listener needs to be. If I tell too much of my story, I will restrain the listener. You know. So I want
such a good point.
Yeah. So I want the listener to be able to meet this song open-minded and let their own darkness into this and work with their own darkness in this. And then we take it on to the other songs which are in the cover. They're all have explanation to what part they play in this ritual and why they're there. You know,
that approach that you've taken to that, to keeping it vague on purpose, I think is really important to the fact that, like, when I listen to the album, I don't want to call it inserting myself, but relating, I think, is the better way to put it. I do relate to it more because there is the vagueness to it, and that you let the listener maybe imagine or just see themselves as a part of this ritual. Again, it's what I said at the very beginning. It's like you are inviting me into a ritual that you are playing for me, and that I am participating just by listening. And again, I just think that right there is what makes Blota such like an important album, and what I think makes it really special. So thank you for giving that gift to all of us. I really appreciate it. I was hoping that my physical copy would be here before the interview so I could hold it up and say, please get the physical copy. It really helps artists. But knowing my luck, it'll show up in the mailbox like right when we end this call.
But sending things from Norway is rubbish.
I know. I'm waiting for 3 records right now that I ordered over a month ago from Scandinavia. So it's not just a Kjell Braaten thing. It's not just a By Norse thing. I have many things.
I have been struggling with sending out albums this summer though, because I've been traveling all the time. So I have been really slow on this, and I have been in touch with a few people that has waited for a long time. Finally,
but it's worth it.
Everything is sent out and everything is fine finally.
It's worth it. So and just to wrap this up, Kjell, just to put this in like a more emotional place, I'm very close with my family dog. He's a golden retriever, and he's probably going to be put down this week. And so but your music, what you've taught me about using music to take darkness and work with it rather than let it be a burden, that's like really resonating with me, and your music helps me through that sort of thing, and it's taught me a thing or two about using music to process my feelings. I had the same conversation with Runehild too. I have a feeling you two talk to each other. Just a little bit.
I've become a very good friend of mine.
Yeah.
I mean,
and so you guys have taught me a very important lesson about using music to process and to heal and to deal with that sort of stuff. And I know that I'm not the only one who's learned that lesson from you guys. So again, what you do is really important, and I think it's really helpful to a lot of people. And I'm very humbled that you were to come onto this stinky little YouTube channel to talk about your experiences and everything. I've learned so much from you. And I'm getting your album thing tattooed around my arm next month. So I'm really looking forward.
Look forward to see that.
Yeah, hell yeah. It's just, again, I think I've said enough. I've beat this horse already. Great album. I really hope everyone listens to it. Kjell, where can people find you if they want to learn more about you?
All right. You can find me on Instagram or Facebook. If you go to Facebook, search for Kjell Braaten Music, which is where I post about what I'm doing. And you find me on kjellbraaten.com. And quite simple. And then
All
any streaming service or wherever. If you want physical copies, you have to go through Bandcamp, but you'll find the link on kjellbraaten.com in my shop link there.
All right, cool. And I'll link it in the YouTube and podcast description too, because I'm a huge champion of buying physical copies. I've got a whole vinyl and record collection over here. So I always make a point.
Guys who makes it possible for us to keep up doing what we do.
I try, because again, people, I try to get the word out there that the best way to support musicians is to buy a physical copy. So it's very important. So Kjell, thank you for letting me hold you hostage on this phone call for almost 2 hours. I really appreciate it. I feel like I could talk with you for another 2 hours. Please don't be a stranger. I really enjoyed talking to you. Really appreciate your music, and I'm looking forward to meeting you in person eventually. All right.
Yeah.
All right, cool. Thank you for stopping by the channel. I hope you have a great day, man.
Yeah, you made it a very good day.
Oh, thank you for that. Yeah, I try. I do these for myself as much as I do these for other people, because I really do learn a lot from every musician I have on here. So I think it's really awesome to learn from you guys, because it's definitely a style of music that has a lot to do with personal expression and personal experience. And so that's why I think it's really important to give you guys a platform. And also my screaming parrot wants a platform too.
Yeah.
All right, cool, Kjell. Thank you so much. Please don't be a stranger, and I look forward to whatever your next project is. All right.
Thank you.
All right, cool. Take care. Yeah.
Same.